Welcome to Just Break Up, the podcast about love, heartbreak, and all the relationship advice you don't want to hear. My name is Sierra DeMulder.
And I'm Sam Blackwell. And today we're going to answer a letter from somebody who is trying to figure out their relationship logistics. But before we begin, we just want to give you our Surgeon General's warning, which is that Sierra and I are not licensed mental health practitioners.
Correct. We are not professionals. We are not trained in any of this or accredited in any way to give you advice. We are just two people with microphones. So please take our advice as you see fit and seek professional support from people who know what they're talking about. We are just here to offer our humble musings to hopefully shed some understanding and maybe some laughs about the incredibly rewarding, but mostly confusing experience that is love. All right, Sam, today is Monday, Juneteenth. So we are going to have a check-in topic, and that check-in topic is inspired by something I learned from our friend Casey Tanner over at Queer Sex Therapy, which is a great Instagram account resource. We had them on our show, interviewed them a year ago, plus they're amazing, and their Instagram is great. And recently, Casey shared something where they were talking about rules of engagement to utilize when you are in a healthy relationship around conflict. And the rules come from someone named Ruth Cohn. And the rule that Sam and I are going to dive into today is called the 90-10 rule. And that is basically an agreement that 10% of your conflict with your partner is actually about the content of the conflict, right? Like, you didn't load the dishwasher or
Right.
You didn't call me back right away when you got home from work or whatever. And 90% of the conflict is about the wounding and the trauma and the baggage and the history and your cultural conditioning and all of these things, right? Like you used the word logistics earlier to talk about the letter that we're going to talk about. And I thought that was a perfect word. Like, 10% of it is about the actual details, logistics of the conflict, you know? And 90% of it is about how we are taught, trained, triggered to respond to said conflict.
For sure.
Yeah. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that is a good reminder for us to think about like what's under the surface for us, right? Like I think that self-awareness in most instances is like a good place to start of why am I so mad about the dishwasher not being loaded? Or why am I so mad that we're late again, right? Like there are things where we can look at it and say like, what is this thing saying about me, saying about our relationship, saying about our household, saying like all of this stuff that's kind of under the surface that is a product of our families of origin, our cultural conditioning, like all of this stuff that we're talking about.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's like, oh, when you don't load the dishwasher, it tells me that you don't care about our household, right? Or when you don't load the dishwasher and people are coming over, my cultural conditioning around having the house clean when people come over is triggered. We're going to tell that it's going to mean that we're not taking care of ourselves, that we don't respect them, right? Like that kind of stuff can be super helpful to get into. Yeah. And so I do think that thinking 10% of this is above the water line, right? Like it's like an iceberg, right? Like 10% of it is above the water line. But if we're not paying attention to the under stuff, then we're going to crash our ship into the iceberg if we're not careful.
I feel like this sort of equation or approach to thinking about conflict is particularly helpful to me right now in my life. You know, I'm in a stable, healthy, long-term relationship in which our conflicts are mostly about logistics, are about literally who's going to take the baby to daycare, you know, or how many diapers did you pack for the baby? You only packed 3. We're going to be here for 4 days. What do you know, blah, blah, blah. I don't know, making all this up.
For sure.
But, you know, I like this tool as something to remember or to apply, especially when your relationship is, I don't know, mostly stable, right? And you can't figure out why certain things activate you so much, you know? Like what's coming up here other than the dishes, like you said, other than the logistics? Why am I feeling so anxious about people seeing my unfolded laundry or whatever? But you and I were having a great conversation about another way to look at this, which I really appreciate as well, which was, if you want to introduce it.
Oh, sometimes it's just about the material thing too, right? Like, you know, as we're thinking about, like, of course, when we're thinking about our own approach to the world, we need to be paying attention to, like, what's above the surface and then, like, what's below the surface. But I also think that, like, in management of conflict, sometimes the solution to the conflict is just doing the material thing and, like, not necessarily having to, like, get into, like, you know, for me, it's like, you know, I'm just frustrated that you didn't load the dishwasher, right? Like, there's nothing underneath it. It's just that I asked you to do a thing and you didn't do the thing, right? Like, it's very material. That might actually be really true. But then we can get into this place where we're assuming, like, oh, they're mad about the dishwasher. That means that they, like, might think that our relationship is, like, faltering, right? Yeah. Oh, absolutely. This must trigger their internal wound. And maybe it's just like, no, I just asked you to do a thing and you didn't do the thing. Yeah. So I do want to, like, create space for the idea that, like, for sure, some of this may be about, like, our relationship or about, like, the symbolism behind something. But sometimes it's just like somebody asked you to do a thing and you didn't do it. And the way to resolve that conflict is not to have, like, a big old conversation about our triggers, right? But instead be like, oh, you're right. Absolutely. Let me just load the dishwasher. Or, oh, you're right. I did say that in a way that was, like, uncomfortable. Or
let me let go of
like,
it. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Right. Where it's like, sometimes we just need to, like, hear what the person is asking of us and just correct our behavior without necessarily needing to, like, get into all of the nitty gritty about it in the moment, right? You know what I mean?
Like, of course. I actually really appreciate this because I feel like I can almost get introspection fatigue sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, I really do love this approach to conflict. I apply it multiple times a day, just thinking, like, what is it? You know what it is? Marrying these two ideas, marrying the 90-10 plus, like, sometimes the idea that it is just about the dishes and not about, like, your childhood trauma, marrying them together, being aware that I am a immensely complex expression of a lifetime of diverse experiences
for sure
allows
absolutely.
Me to let go faster when I know, like, you know what, I'm, like, really sensitive to having people over at our house, you know, when our house is messy. I know where that's coming from. I don't have to examine it more. I feel, like, healed and whole and acknowledged, and I can, like, let go of it faster. Or my significant other didn't make eye contact with me when they made that comment. I know that I have triggers in my past because when people, like, you know, physically distance themselves from me, but, like, because I know that history, I know I'm sensitive to it, but it's like I can move on faster when I marry when I marry those two ideas. I don't know if that is, like, articulate.
No, I think
at
it's
all,
helpful. I think you're sort of speaking to the idea that, like, spending more time in the 90% allows us to, like,
then live in the 10% more. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Where it's like, you know, you didn't load the dishwasher, and I find that frustrating because, like, I find it frustrating when people don't do what I ask. And, like, also, like, this was a job that I, like, all of this stuff. But then you're just like, oh, I asked you to load the dishwasher and you didn't load it. Can you load it? Like, I'm not, like, triggered. I'm not, like, but I just need you to do this thing for me.
The 90% is on us, right?
Yeah.
The 90%, the 90% is about our awareness. Right? Mm-hmm. Oh, that's why I'm getting so activated. That's why I'm being so sensitive. That's why I snapped in that way. Right? It's not on your partner to, you know, anticipate that, to heal that, to, you know, move throughout their life trying to prevent that from being activated again. It's about you moving forward with that knowledge and trying to nurture and heal yourself accordingly. But to the point that Sam was making that I totally agree with, there is this fatigue, right? Of, like, oh my God, I'm so, you know, like, everything that's ever happened to me is always happening again. There's, like, this frustration of, like, can't I just, like, have a conversation about dishes and not be like, this is my childhood trauma? Yes, you can, you know, like,
you can. Absolutely. Yes.
We are resilient. We are a product of everything. And we are also, resilient and capable of seeing things just as they are.
For sure.
They're just dishes.
Sure. Sometimes it's just the dishes,
Yeah.
Like that doesn't have to be anything deeper. Or maybe the solution to the conflict or the way to manage the conflict doesn't need to get into like the nitty gritty. Instead, it can just be like, cool, I will do the thing that you asked me to do because you asked me to do it. Or I will apologize for the thing that I said because I agree that there was a thing that was like not an appropriate thing to say, right? Like, there's a way in which we can operate where we don't necessarily have to get into the introspection fatigue that I think many of us are struggling with.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Love that conversation. Let's dive into today's letter. It is from Reluctant Baby Mama, whose pronouns are she, her, who is writing to us from probably Doucheville. How do I tell my significant other that she would be a bad mom? Hi, Sam and Sierra. Before I start off, thank you so much for this gem of a podcast. It has helped me feel seen, and I get such good perspective. I am in need of probably some tough love. I, 33, she, her, have been in a long-distance relationship for a year with my girlfriend, 35, she, her. Let's call her Boo. Although I haven't said the L word yet, mainly because of the distance, I feel really connected with Boo, and I hope we can continue to grow and develop in relationship with one another. From the beginning of our relationship, Boo has had 2 deal breakers: that she wants to travel from country to country every few years, and that she wants kids. I'm super excited about the first and not so much about the second. I'm neutral to negative in terms of kids. I was a nanny when I was studying, and I have lots of cousins, so I've been surrounded by small children most of my life. That being said, I'm not against having children, so I could see it happening in the next few years. Boo, on the other hand, has spent a year teaching children abroad, but otherwise doesn't have much experience of them by her own admission. This is probably where I sound like a massive dick. My worry is that Boo wants children, but doesn't really appreciate what that means. Boo is a self-confessed introvert who prefers to do nothing, and any sort of social interaction, in her words, exhausts her. She's funny and kind and caring, but she's also short-tempered and has told me that she thinks shouting and maybe even hitting children is okay. Whilst this doesn't mean she would be a bad mom, I don't think she realizes how hard parenting is. Children really don't give a fuck if you're exhausted or not. And in my opinion, the day I hit a child is the day I fail as a parent. Whenever we discussed anything about children, she brushes off any hardship as if it won't happen, or just tells me that I don't understand because I don't have a maternal instinct, something that I've confirmed to her and we have discussed. In terms of her plans to move countries, we've spoken in the past about uprooting children, and her response is they'll get over it. Whilst children who move around aren't necessarily scarred by it, I just don't understand the reasoning. In my own world, children are a joy, but also an important consideration that change your life, and that their needs should come first, or at least while they're of formative ages. My parents pursued their dreams within the confines of the stability that we needed as children, and I can't imagine uprooting children from their friends, family, and school systems just on a whim. Am I being a dick? What do I do? I feel like I'm moving towards a situation where she persuades me into children and then realizes how hard it is, and then I'm left to pick up the pieces with children that I was potentially ambivalent about. Do I talk to her or just break up?
All right, Reluctant Baby Mama, thank you for writing us and trusting us with this question. I just want to say off the bat that I think that your concerns about like what this relationship would look like in terms of having kids, moving around, the different parenting styles that you two seem to want to espouse, and your concern about the idea of, whether or not your partner's perspective on what child rearing is going to look like are like too rosy or optimistic, right? Like, I think that all of those concerns are 100% valid. And I don't think that you're a dick for having those concerns. And I think Sierra and I are going to talk a little bit about how you can sort of frame this in a perspective that might make it a little bit easier for you to navigate and maybe have some conversations, some really realistic conversations with your partner about what your future is going to look like. But before we get into it, we are going to take a quick break.
All right, my darling, thank you so much for trusting us with this letter. I totally agree with Sam. You're not being a dick. These are really important things to be transparent about, to flesh out with your partner. When I was preparing for this letter, I was thinking about our resistance to not just conflict in relationships, but how sometimes it's hard to navigate when you and your partner disagree about things. It's hard to navigate it when you disagree about, your vision of having children. It's hard to navigate it when you disagree on like how fast to drive or what to get for dinner,
For sure.
You will always disagree about strategies, approaches. Even if you become parents, you will always disagree about things. Like you will never be completely in harmony. However, you have to be in alignment on at least the big things, right? You have to be in alignment about the things that are connected to your morals and your vision for your future. And to be honest, I guess I just want to take time during this response to tell you that it's absolutely okay to not want to have children. And it's also okay to not want to have children with this person that you love.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Because it sounds like you don't want to. It sounds like there would have to be major character changes. And a lot of labor would have to happen for you to get on the same page about the approaches of parenting that you think are appropriate or not appropriate.
Yep.
Choosing to not, it's like, for example, I'm trying to think about something with me and my wife and our baby. Like, this is stupid, but it's a perfect example. I like to dress my child in clothing that matches. Willow doesn't care about that. She doesn't care about that.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah?
All of that makes 100% sense to me based on what I know about you too.
We disagree. And that's a fine thing to disagree with. And to be honest, that's such a stupid, frivolous thing. But like, I had to let go of control, right? Like I have to say there are approaches to parenting that we're just not going to be in alignment on. She's going to care about things that I don't care about and vice versa. However, having your child be in one secure place for a significant amount of time during their formative years or not, huge disagreement, huge thing. That's something that you have to be in alignment with. Physical punishment, absolutely a huge deal breaker for me, right? Yep. Have to be in alignment about that. And then at the end of the day, wanting children or not, and wanting children with this person. You ask, like, should I talk about it or just break up? The obvious answer is gotta talk about it. But first I want to just say, like, these reservations are very reasonable. And it's also okay to love someone and to not want, it's okay to love someone and to have a differing vision for your future, right? But at some point that differing vision is going to become reality, right? And you're going to have to act on it one way or another.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it might be helpful for you to look at this situation and instead of thinking about it in like, this person's going to trick me into being a parent and then they're going to be a bad mom. Right. Like that's a very sort of like,
well, you're making a lot of assumptions there.
A lot of assumptions. Yes, absolutely. I think it would be helpful if we sort of looked at this in the idea of, like Sierra said, you two have different approaches to what parenting would look like and whether or not you want to be parents. And then I want you to do the internal work of figuring out for yourself, where are the hard lines in this, right? If you were to be a parent, what would that parenting need to look like for you to be okay with saying yes to?
Yes.
Right? And I want you to think about it. And I want you to think like, It would not be okay for us to move a lot. It would not be okay for us to use physical punishment, right? It would not be okay for us to whatever else the thing might be. Or if we're going to do this, here's what I would need, right? We would need to talk about what co-parenting looks like, right? We would need to have some pretty set sort of ideas of who's doing what and how we're going to hold ourselves accountable to those things, right? Obviously recognizing that like once the baby comes, it's like all of that planning kind of goes everywhere.
Honestly, babies are great for introverts because you can't do a goddamn thing.
That's right. You just have to stay home. Just
kidding.
And play with the baby.
They're exhausting no matter who you are. Well, I think about like it's not about first. It's not about what's. Sam and I are not trying to say which parenting style is right or wrong. Our priority here is to get you to talk about, uprooting kids, what uprooting kids means to you. Like Sam said, talk about this incompatibility because it's not even about who's right or wrong or what approach is what we would do, what method. It's about this fact that you guys are not on the same page.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, as I was reading your letter, I think that the thing that I took away from it is that like you feel very unempowered in this situation, right? Like you feel like all of this stuff is happening to you.
Yes.
And I want to just like offer you the idea that like you also get to make decisions about your own life and your own relationship. I understand that these are deal breakers for her, that she wants kids and she wants to move countries every 2 years. Those don't really feel like compatible deal breakers to me, but like we could talk about that separately. But I also want to say that like you get to decide whether or not those deal breakers are confines within which you can have this relationship, right? Yeah. Like, and I think that you can also come to this and say like, I am actually not going to have children with you unless we can agree to some of these things. And if we can't, then like we can't be in relationship with each other, or we need to be in a relationship with each other without kids or whatever it might be. But you are an active player in this relationship. You get to make decisions about how you want to participate in it. And I know that it feels like she's sort of putting these rules on you, but I want to say that you can have boundaries around these rules, right? You can say like, that rule is not working for me, or we need to be doing something differently in this way. So I think looking at this more as like we are two people coming into this with particular points of view around how our relationship is going to look like in the future, rather than just saying she's a strong, opinionated person and I'm somebody who's just going to go along to get along
and get punished by it,
and then deal with her stuff. Like I want you to be like, oh no, I am also an equal player in this relationship, and I get to also make some decisions about what is or isn't okay with me in terms of what the future of our relationship looks like, how our children are going to be raised, like all of that stuff as well.
I love that. And I want to add to, all things are possible. And I don't mean that in the way that I think a lot of people say something like that when we're talking about like wanting to have children or not. I think a lot of people are like, oh, you'll have them and you'll love them, or you'll never know,
Oh, for sure.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying there's a lot of assumption, like Sam said. He's totally right. We read this letter and it's like, this is happening and this could happen and it's going to happen to me and it's going to happen in this way, or my partner is going to show up in this way. I want you to approach this with curiosity, and I also want you to approach it with surety that your needs and desires are totally valid and totally reasonable and appropriate to advocate for. You don't have to go along with anything, but who knows, maybe your partner will say like, you know what, I realize that to be honest, like Sam made a joke about it earlier, but it doesn't really sound like this person is, like you said, really in touch with what all of these logistics all at once would feel like. You know what I mean?
And it also like, I want to also I don't want to disparage this person because it may be that they're just they're not a planner in the way that you are.
That's exactly what I think it is, to be honest.
Right?
Because sometimes when Willow and I were talking about having babies, we would sit and talk about what we're looking forward to, what we'd be afraid of, all of these things. And sometimes, oh my God, the check-in topic, we would come at something totally differently. And for example, when we talk about hard things, sometimes I talk about how we can endure them more than I talk about how actually hard they will be. And at first in our relationship, Willow would interpret that as me not realizing how actually hard things would be, because because I would go immediately to problem solving or strategizing, or I don't know, it could be mistaked as aloofness or misplaced positivity.
Yeah.
So maybe there's some communication barrier happening here. We don't know your partner. We don't know the ins and outs of them. But it also just sounds like you need to talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
With a lot of honesty. Go ahead.
No, and I think that I think approaching this too as again, understanding that this person isn't necessarily is going to be a bad mom because she's not thinking about this logistics. Instead, sort of being this person has a dream and vision for their life, and maybe they're not getting bogged down with the minutia of what it's going to look like, but that doesn't mean that they're not capable of stepping up once it actually happens, right? And adjusting and shifting and doing what they need to do, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Some of us are planners, right? And some of us take things as they go, right? It's oh yeah, when that happens, we'll figure it out. That's a lifestyle, and it's not a bad one. It's just different than people who are yes, but what about this and this and this and this and this and this? Doesn't mean either of them is unprepared for what's going to happen. It just means that they're going to approach it differently in the moment.
Yes, I really appreciate that distinction, and that makes it that much more important for you to say I don't really see my life with children. You know what I mean? It makes it that much more important for you to be and if I did have kids, I wouldn't want to do these things. Are we in alignment? Can we create a shared vision for our future that we both say, yes, this is what I want, not waiting for the other person to change their mind, not waiting for the other person to change their lived, experience style.
For sure.
But instead being can we truly see a life in which we are doing this as co-parents together in a way that feels true and authentic to both of us?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, my darling. Thank you so much for writing and trusting us with this letter. We love you.
We love you. We hope this helps. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. If you would like more content from us, or if you would like your episodes ad-free, you can always support us on Patreon. If you support us on Patreon for as little as $5 a month, you'll get an additional bonus weekly episode, as well as access to all of our episodes without ads. That's patreon.com/justbreakuppod.
You can slide into our DMs, send us your favorite relationship memes, but most importantly, you can submit your questions about all matters of the heart at justbreakuppod.com, which is also where you can find our merchandise.
Please remember to follow, subscribe, give us a 5-star rating and review. This literally keeps our mics on and helps us reach more brokenhearted souls who need 2 random strangers giving them relationship advice.
Just Break Up is a production of Duvid Media, original music, recording, editing, producing, all magical things by our good friend Spencer Worth Davis. Make sure to check out his podcast and his music under Big Cats. And remember, disagreeing is an inevitable part of partnerships, of relationships of all different kinds, romantic or not. We are not going to see eye to eye with everyone, especially someone we spend the majority of our time communicating with. We are just too different, too diverse. But you do need to be in alignment on at least the big things, the things that represent your future, your goals, your morals. And it's okay to advocate for those things. And if all else fails,
just break up.